Why don't you introduce yourself? The Persistent Rumor presents Chocolate Chat. We're gonna try our first interview, and I think there's no better woman that I could think of speaking to, especially on the subject of relationships and whatever else comes into our mind. So go ahead and introduce yourself to whatever audience finds this.
Thanks, FJ. So, to everybody, hello, I'm Karen Lyons. I'm a life coach, but I'm so much more than a life coach. I'm a woman with a vast array of colourful life experience. I'm a woman who's evolved and grown through 2 marriages. I have children and grandchildren I would like to drown at times. However, they come from strong genetic pools, pun intended.
Yeah.
So I'm a woman who's had a diverse background in entertainment, fitness, property development, hospitality, and human psyche.
Wow, there you go. All right. Well, that your CV is way better than mine, but
you are so humble.
I am a clever bloke, so I have that going for me. So I know that what sparked this conversation, and though we've known each other on Facebook for like 10 or so years, this is the first time we're actually talking directly to one another, so that's pretty interesting. But one of the things that caught your attention was the piece I did about women's attitudes and their arrogance when the man likes them, but they love him. So we can either build on that or we can talk about anything else on your mind regarding that. But I think my overarching goal in this conversation and throughout most of the Chocolate Chat series is going to be to just give a different perspective about relationships, especially I think the one that's lacking the most is the perspective that women have about men. And the reason I say that is that men as the pursuers, which is very consistent in nature, right? The male of the mammal species is the one that chases, right? So when you hunt something, you have to learn about it. We have to learn about women, but women don't necessarily have to learn about men. And as a result, they wind up getting a lot of terrible advice. And it's usually from other women, right? So I'm trying to balance that scale and kind of give women some insight and some tools that they can use to improve their relationships. And I think it's quite an undertaking, but I've been doing it in my private life for decades now. And I know the effects that it's had. Women have reported back to me some of the things that they've experienced in a positive way. And so I just want to broaden the net and reach as many women as possible. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. I love your story. I love your umbrella. I love what you're not attempting, you are doing. I love what you are doing. It has been attempted in minute ways by alpha females, and you know what I mean by that. It's probably slightly more well received, but I think that ultimately it needs to come from a man and a man's perspective. Right. So in that episode where you talked about, what was it, the mating ritual? And no, the mating dance, dance. And then you were talking about women having to up the ante, like you as a man fulfilled societal roles, and you had absolutely no issue with that. So let's be really clear about that. You were totally cool with what was your so-called responsibility and how you were perceived as a man and as your role as a man. So then you were saying that women really needed to up the ante. Once you had fulfilled your role, women were sitting back in a fairly lackadaisical fashion going, well, great, awesome.
Right. And, so I'll add some context to that because that's an excellent point. What that means specifically is that we know through nature, right? Because I'm a big fan of trying to understand the world through nature, because there are patterns that exist and they exist for a reason. And the design is in the vast majority of mammal species. And I don't care what penguins do, and I don't care what fish do, but this is pretty consistent to those species as well. But specifically to mammals, of the just over 5,100 mammal species, only 7 of them are matriarchal. The rest are patriarchal, and we know from watching nature shows that it's usually the male that has to attract the female, and that's done in a variety of ways. Either it's a display of strength, a display of beauty, or a display of capability, and in some cases a combination of those. Like, for instance, the fact that a lion has a mane that is totally useless to the lion. That mane is there to attract females, and at the same time he's got to go kill another dude to prove how strong he is, right? And that's all fine. That I have nothing against that system. It's how nature works. I'm okay with that. So when a woman tells me she loves me, that means that I have fulfilled my role. I've done my job. I've done, and I do it genuinely. I don't manipulate. I don't trick. I don't lie. I present myself. Here I am. I present my personality and my existence at your feet, and you tell me if that works for you. And if it does, that's great. But what women tend to do with that is go, well, I love him, so he must love me. But why is that automatic? Why is it that because you fell in love with me that automatically I should love you? You haven't done anything at this point.
Well, I think the first thing there is that women are notorious for sitting in hope. Notorious for it. We are notorious for sitting in hope in any situation. So let's just put that one into the pot. I mean, just with your last spiel alone and all that information, I feel like an octopus. You know, I feel like my tentacles I'm going everywhere. I've got all these questions, but let's do your best to reel me in here, FJ.
No, fire away. I'm ready for you.
So I realize that these are generalized questions, okay? I realize that the individual comes into play, clearly. However, as a man, generally, what is it that you want from a woman to ante up? So as an example, is it that you want her to be more educated or to continue her education? Do you want her to take care of herself physically? Do you want her to be more supportive, more accepting? What else did I write down? Nurturing, independent and codependent, or independent or codependent. You know, the list is long, darling.
Sure. So I'll tell you what. Not only, I think there's 3 phases to that answer.
Okay.
One is you started off mentioning women as individuals.
Yes.
And that's 100% true, but that's never what I speak to. And here's what I mean by that. When you or anyone else talks about women or people as individuals, you're talking about who they are, right? That's all the variegation between, you know, temperament and personality and likes, dislikes, and all that other stuff, and all the uniqueness that makes every life a separate entity from every other life, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is what women are, right? And what men are as well. So that's an important distinction, because it from a strategic point of view, it makes no sense to try to address women as a whole with who they are, because they're not all the same as far as who they are. But as far as what they are, there are patterns that nature has established over time, right? So that's the first thing. The other thing is,
I interject?
Sure.
Interject there and say that clearly those patterns have been disrupted by modern society. Obviously.
Yeah, no, that's something that I would respectfully disagree with. We think that we like to think that people have changed because things around us have changed. That is scientifically untrue. When you look at brain scans, when you look at psychological tests, they have been shockingly consistent for decades and decades and decades. Our brains physically and physiologically have not changed in over 65,000 years, and probably longer than that. Because, you know, think about it. We've only been a species for 300,000 years, right? and change comes slowly to the to species. So while we can now send emails with our thumbs, that doesn't mean that we are different. That means our technology is different.
So outside influences you don't feel have, I mean, I understand what you're saying scientifically, and I agree with that. Outside influences, say where a woman is put in a position where she needs to step up further for her family or whatever, she tends to take on more alpha roles. And some women are able to slip in and out of that, be feminine and masculine. Others tend to formulate a habit and stay in that masculine role. And I think that has also been a contributing factor to the sliding scale of how relationships play out.
That to a certain degree is true. You're talking about the variances in societal norms and roles and things. Yes, I agree with that, and that's a great topic to speak to. But to finish out your earlier questions, what men want? Okay, so
I'm all
ears. This is the biggest divergence between men and women, and it's not a critical diversion. There's no divergence. There's no. It's not a chasm that can't be crossed, but it is one that unfortunately does not get acknowledged, and this is where the problems come in, right? So there's a comedian who unfortunately died in 2011 named Patrice O'Neill, and I'm stealing this line from him, which is, "Women build relationships from the top down, and men build relationships from the bottom up." And how does that translate?
Is so true.
Yeah. And how does that play out? Based on the question that you asked me, which is what do men want? This is how it works. We want the same thing you want. We just want it in a different order, right? Women have to build the connection before sex, before that kind of physical intimacy. Men want the sex and then build the physical, the emotional intimacy after that, right?
So it's the old women play at sex for love, men play at love for sex.
Right. So I there was a great example of this. I was sitting with two women in a restaurant. One of them was my girlfriend at the time, and the other one was her best friend. And her best friend was complaining about men. And all they want is sex. All they want is sex. That's all they want. That's all they want to do is have sex. And I said, okay. I said, we're in a restaurant right now, right? Look behind me. There are about 20 couples. Are they having sex right now? No. They're sitting in a restaurant because guys like to eat too, right? And then and this was the most important part of the conversation. I said, let me ask you something. How'd you meet this guy? And it was online, right? So I said, so let me ask you, when you were scrolling through photos and you finally came on his photo, was your first reaction to say, oh, this looks like a man who might be potentially a lovely person and I want to get to know him? Or was your initial reaction,
hello, right? Hello.
Exactly. just like Hannibal Lecter said in Silence of the Lamb, we begin to covet by what we see, right? Yeah. So your reaction to him was a sexually based reaction. Is that not true? And she said, yes, it's true. I said, so why are you angry at him for having the same reaction that he had? You had the same reaction he had. What is the problem? You know,
and it's completely primal anyway.
Of course. And that's what we are. The primal part is what we are. All the stuff on top of that is all wonderful and great, but that's who we are. And it makes no sense to try to figure out all the different personalities out there. I mean, I've studied psychology for 44 years, and I get all the different personality types and all that wonderful stuff. None of that's important. Not in the context of connecting, pardon me, connecting to another person and having a relationship. That part really is the primal part. You know, that's you know, it's I'll clean this saying up, but it's you know, the old saying about women is you don't know what you want, but your vagina does. Right?
I'm glad you cleaned that up.
I don't have to. It's my podcast. I can say whatever I want. But I decided to clean it up.
I would have gone with the lotus flower, but hey, I'm a girl.
Yeah, the lotus flower. That's great. That would have been my third choice. But,
and that is so true, FJ, because things like as we know, and I'm sure people who are listening know about the 5 love languages. And if you don't know about the 5 love languages, then Google it, buy a book, Kindle, whatever. That stuff is all amazing, along with other information. But you're right, it does. There's the but. You're right, it comes later. Understanding the person in greater depth, that comes later. And it comes later after the primal attraction and the mating to find out if you actually are compatible. If this goes back to the primal, when a woman sees a guy with a really prominent backside, of which FJ has, by the way, a really strong, prominent backside. Often women don't know why they're drawn to that, but it's the thrusting power during sex for, keeping the species going, et cetera, et cetera.
It's it's the same visual cue as large breasts, wide hips, all that stuff. Exactly. we are reacting to what we are, and that's okay. And the more that women, and this is true for men, but since we're talking about women, I'll focus on them. But the more women move away from what they are and what society says they're supposed to be, the more problems they tend to have in relationships.
Agreed,
for
100%.
A famous American comedian wrote this book that is the most atrocious advice that a woman could get. It's called I never read the book, but I heard him talk about the content of the book, and of course they did a film about it. It's if I were a woman, I would be horrified by the advice in this, because just like I say to women, you can't tell me how to pick you up because you're the hunted, I'm the hunter. A deer doesn't explain to a bear how to catch it, right? A man cannot tell a woman how to be a woman. And his advice is offensive. He's teaching women to turn their vagina into a commodity. It's ridiculous.
The only thing that I agree with him about in the book is there's an underlying, take accountability for yourself all the time. Respect yourself enough to do A, B, C, D, to Z. That side, that underlying content in the book, I agree with. The delivery of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's in the context of all the other crap he said.
Well, and I don't think we need to really talk about, but anyway, he just got a plug.
No, I'm talking about his work, which, just in case anybody's thinking of buying that crap, don't do it, because it'll ruin your life, because it creates an artificial set of rules that have nothing to do with what we are. It creates judgment about what you are. Like, if you're following your sexual desire, you are condemned for that based on his philosophy, which I find disgusting. We are what we are. We are driven by, look, biology has demonstrated very clearly what our primary drivers are, right? Because your body rewards you for doing the thing that you're supposed to do. So when you eat, you get endorphins because you need to keep yourself alive. When you exert yourself physically, you get endorphins because you want to keep yourself healthy. And when you have sex, you have the same endorphins because we want the species to keep going. So when you tell me that I'm supposed to somehow cut that part of myself off, I mean, do we have a better example of how wrong it is to try to stop people from their nature than Catholic priests? I don't think so. Okay.
And when I listen to you speak and explain it with such honesty and authenticity, which thank you very much, and other women who are watching this is amazing feedback. This is gold. So I'm thinking back to a time with my previous partner, And he used to always talk constantly about acceptance. There's this acceptance factor. You know, if women in particular, people, yes, but if women in particular were more accepting about certain things that their man did, and that sexual desire came into that,
Sure.
then there would be a much greater understanding, or at least flexibility with that understanding. There'd be fluidity with it. Whereas it tends to be, you know, I've watched a Disney movie since I was 5 years old, blah, blah, blah. This is, you know, this is what's laid out for me, and this is how it should be. And that clearly isn't the case at all. So I'm feeling that an acceptance of understanding about how the opposite sex are, as in right now talking about men, seems to me from a woman's perspective to be one of the biggest leaps forward. To be open, absolutely, to not feel reactionary to things and to listen to the feedback, to be open to hearing something that possibly you've never heard before, and to actually truly take that on board and start sitting in acceptance and then looking deeper from there.
Yes, that no truer words have been spoken. I like to put things in a perspective that people can relate to, right? So one of the biggest frustrations that any human being can experience is when they feel they're not being heard, right? So this is part of why men die 7 years on average before women, is because society tells us that what we are is toxic, and it tells us what we are is wrong. It tells us not to hide our emotions, but then it tells us that we need to be sensitive. There's all these conflicting messages that men get throughout their whole lives. And one of the things that women do consistently, this is true for every woman I've ever met and every woman I've ever been told of by another man. So take that for what it's worth, okay? But there are things that men would love to talk to women about, but the conversation gets shut down immediately. And not being heard is a huge frustration. So if you're wondering why your guy is cheating on you, there are lots of factors that play into that, but a lot of it is you just didn't want to hear him out. You know, he like, I had a conversation with a woman once, a woman I was in love with, and I said, look, I get that you're not into sex right now, but I'm too young to give up sex. So I want to stay with you. I want to be with you. I love you and I care about you. And you know, I want to stay with you, but I still enjoy sex. So how about if we, you know, allow me the privilege and the to take on other partners for that purpose? Conversation got shut down. So that was one of the last nails in the coffin. Because
that's a tough conversation for a lot of.
It's an extremely tough conversation.
It's a
for
tough
men
conversation
and women.
for people. There are a lot of people that would find that a very large pill to swallow.
Because
however,
that's the conditioning that we've gotten by vilifying what we are. Because you're not, you know, because when a woman says men are pigs, she's not talking about who we are. She's talking about what we are. And men have been vilified, and some of the vilification is warranted, but most of it is not. You know, this idea of the patriarchy is just ridiculous to me, but go ahead.
I mean, clearly you're very passionate about that, and I love that about you. And when you make a comment like, you know, that you've said that, you know, women see men as pigs, etc., you know, it's a general comment. However, they're also, it's not even their own perception. It's not even their own experience, because a lot of the time it will be the women as the group, the clan, if you like, you know, around the table, etc., sharing their stories. So they actually take on board other people's experiences as their own and cement that and say, oh, this is how most guys are, which is completely unfair and completely incorrect. So, you know, I myself am guilty of certain things. However, I have to say that because I've kept an open mind, because I've continued to learn, because I listen to people like yourself and others, I see how far I've grown. So I know it's possible. I know anybody can do it, particularly any woman can do it. I'm far more open to listening to a man's point of view now. And my life experiences, my sexual experiences, all of that are so much greater than they were in the past. And my mindset attached to that is so much greater than it was in the past. You know, I used to think that I was very, open, and I realized that I wasn't in so many ways. And I can think about certain things that my previous partner said to me, and I can sit here and say he was right. He was absolutely right. I don't mean that the relationship may have survived because it was, multi-layered. There were lots of things going on. However, in certain areas, I see really clearly where I went, okay, could have listened to that.
Yeah.
And I do remember a time, I'm sorry, I jumped in there, but I really want to say something that I hear a lot of women say. And I do now float between being an alpha female, clearly, and also a very soft, nurturing woman. However, I used to sit a lot in that alpha female because I had this belief system, this illusion that made me powerful. That made me strong. That's what, men needed to see. But I was depleting men if I was with them, or I was attracting the wrong kind of guy, or I was, stealing their masculine ether, if you like. Really, that's how it was. And I said to one of my partners once that I wanted him, but I didn't need him. And I thought I was paying him an enormous compliment. That's what it was to me. Because I was
would
thinking,
agree that it is a compliment, but go ahead.
Well, he didn't. He didn't at all.
This brings up another great point. It's the idea of water seeking its own level and birds of a feather and all that stuff. If a woman is an alpha female, I mean, first of all, we have to understand what that means. It doesn't mean you're a man.
No.
Again, going back to biology, even if a woman is assessed and is in the top 1% of testosterone for women, she still only has 1/8 of the testosterone a man does, right?
Correct.
So if you are an alpha female and a man you meets can't deal with that, he's automatically not the one for you. He failed the test. It's his job to prove that he is worthy of your attention up front, right? After he proves that, like I said, then you'll have to prove that you can hang with him. But if he fails that initial test, move on. I've told women, and I mean this 100%, I'm not intimidated by anyone. There's no man in the world that intimidates me. So there's absolutely no chance a woman has to intimidate me. And I don't mean that in any derogatory sense. It's just like, again, when I watch lions on the plains of the Serengeti, they're not taking orders from the female lions. It's not natural, and it's a collaboration, right? But it's a collaboration based on worthiness, because the male lion has to prove that he's strong and capable and can protect the pride. That's great. The female lion has her roles in raising the children and going to hunt for food. These are not roles where one is better than the other. These are roles that work synergistically to make the whole system work, And so if a guy can't, essentially there's a series of tests that you have to pass, whether you like it or not. That's the system that we as mammals live under, is that the guy has to pass some tests. So if he can't handle the fact that you're a strong woman, it means he's not a strong man. So I love strong women because I'm a strong man. I'm the alpha male that makes other alpha males nervous. Okay. And so, and I'm okay with that. That's just how I came out of the chute. It's not anything I try to do. It's just how I am, and so, I can't be with a woman who's a pushover. I can't be with a woman who's stupid. I know some guys look for stupid women, but that's because they're losers. I need intelligent, strong women that really just don't take any shit from me. Not that I'm looking to give shit, but like stand up for yourself. You know, don't let people steamroll you. You know, that's who I need. Now, look, if you're not that type of guy, then seek the type of woman that you need. Fine, but if you're a woman, like you said earlier, don't live in hope that that guy is somehow going to change and be, you know, just because he, you know, he has some of the other ingredients that you want. He's good looking. He probably makes a decent living, but he's a loser. So move on. Don't go, yeah, I know he's kind of a loser, but I can make him a winner. No. There are zero incidents of that working in life. Okay. And you know,
no.
It reminds me of the very early days of the Oprah Winfrey Show. I've been watching her since, I haven't watched her in a long time, but I started watching her at the beginning of her TV run. And in the beginning, it was all very sensationalized and all that because, you know, she needed to get a footing in television. But one of the most consistent segments that she had was the segment about battered women, right? Very important that she brought this to everyone's consciousness, and I'm glad she did. But the line of questioning was so shockingly consistent, and it was very simple. Oprah would ask the young lady, was he abusive before you married him? Yes. Why did you marry him? I thought he would change.
Yeah.
Every single one of them said that. So living in hope is not the move.
And clearly, and like how many times I've heard that to do with so many things, you know, speaking to women all the time, coaching women. Did this happen pre this? Yes, it did. Right. There's your sign.
You had all the information.
Yeah, there's your sign.
You chose to ignore it.
If you can work in flow with all the other dynamics that come into play with that and many others, the synchronicity between two people is so much more harmonious, but also it's a fit. You know, no one's fighting. No one's got their warrior, you know, outfit on. I'm not standing here like Wonder Woman. You're not standing there like Spartacus. You know, it's not who can outdo. I mean, it could be fun. We could do dress ups, but hey.
Right. But no, what you're saying in a beautiful way is that relationships are easy. And I have evidence for this. Okay. Because and here's the thing, the reason why relationships are discussed as though they're really, really hard is because that creates an industry. Okay. Anytime, just like meditation is the easiest thing in the world, but it's described as it's so difficult and challenging because it creates an industry. I know a guy who wrote a book. He's a Huffington Post contributor, and he wrote a book about meditation. And he said, when we were at the diner one time, he said, look, the book could have been a page long. He said, I did the other 200 pages just to make people feel like they got value for what they want. But that because meditation is easy. Here, you want to learn how to meditate? I can tell you, sit and do nothing. Period. End of the story. That's what meditation is. It's not calming your mind. It's not emptying your thoughts. It's none of that. You know, that's if you want to calm your mind and empty your thoughts before meditating, that's like saying I'll only go into the beach when the water's not moving.
Well, I think there might be some, you know, Buddhist monks who might sort of want to debate that with you a little bit.
I bet you they wouldn't, because if you ask a Buddhist monk what the key to Zen is, he'll say to sleep when you're tired and to eat when you're hungry, right? So it's not about, oh, I got to stop all this other stuff going on around me in order to be happy in the world. It's about
no. I didn't take it that way. Yeah. I mean, you know, even when we're meditating and zenning, the mind monkeys are still jumping around. It's the acceptance that that's going to happen. They're swinging from branch to branch. They're having a rave party.
But very often, when you hear people talking about, like literally every time except for Dean that I've heard someone on television talking about meditation, it was this whole process of stopping your thoughts and all this, and it's nonsense. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with relationships, right? So here's my evidentiary procedure for why relationships are easy. Okay, I watch children at play. And they have to be like, I would say no older than 3, which is they can talk and communicate and understand each other, but they haven't been bombarded with all the nonsense yet, right? They haven't been
Yeah.
brainwashed to try. Like when you see 2 3-year-olds approach each other, here's what you never see and what you never hear. Um, oh, well, what religion are you?
What do you do for a
What
living?
do you do for a living? Who do you vote for? Where are you from? What's your nationality? You never hear that
Yeah.
stuff. You hear, do you want to play? Or you hear, oh, my name is that. What's your name? Right? That, I believe, is what our wiring is, because children are closest to the authentic version of humans, right?
Right. They're
That's
the
what I
purest.
believe. They're the
Yeah.
purest because
Yeah.
their brains haven't been filled with garbage yet. And so what that tells me, like, my favorite story ever of human connection happened in a doctor's office. I was dating a woman, and this is going back to 1983, 84, around there. She had a 1-year-old child, and we had a doctor visit. So I went, hanging out in the waiting room, and there was another 1-year-old that spotted her 1-year-old. And the child walked over. He's holding a bottle, right, sucking on the bottle, and they just look at each other for a couple of seconds. They're not talking yet, right? He just takes the bottle out of his mouth and hands it to the other child, and he took it. He was like, oh, I know what this is, right?
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's who we are. We just want to connect. The pull, the drive to connect with other human beings is so strong that if you put a person in jail, all right, you take away their freedom, you have them living in a 5x7 room, and they are living amongst murderers and rapists, the worst punishment you can think of is solitary confinement. That's how strong the connection, the desire to connect is. And the example of the 1-year-olds is how easy it is to connect with people. But we complicate it as adults and make a mess of things, you know?
And the kids also are so pure at reading body language, because that's what it's about. They're just going on energy, body language, and they're allowing themselves to feel without all the other shit that, all the other mud that you're endeavoring to walk through as an adult, or you think that you're endeavoring to walk through as an adult, and I look at what you were saying about, isolation and people in jail. It's a not to the same extent, well, then again, possibly, but that's happening during COVID. There are people who are suffering
That's why depression has
enormously.
shot up.
Exactly. Mental health, suicide, all of that, because of the isolation and lack of physical touch. Even being out and about and seeing somebody, I can only speak for myself. I'm a naturally very tactile person. So if we'd met in person, I wouldn't hesitate. I would just walk up, wrap my arms around you, give you a great big hug, right? It's so unnatural for tactile people particularly, but I feel this has highlighted it for everybody during COVID, that lack of physical touch and connection. Again, more steps removed. Hang on, the octopus arms are going everywhere. I want to go back.
Sure.
Let's go back.
Why not?
I want to go back to the mating dance. So from your perspective, what do you feel the mating dance is? What do you want to see from a woman? What do you feel? What do you want to feel? And what do you want to see? And what do you want to hear? What do you want from a woman?
It's so I'll answer that as what I want, and then I'll answer what I don't want. Right.
Okay.
So what
hey, I was staying in the staying in the positive. Go on.
What I want is for her to be authentic.
Yeah.
Right. That's probably 99% of it right there. Just be yourself. Like I just had a first date last Saturday, and what we talked about, I think before we went on the date, one of the things I talked about is that I don't send representatives on my date. I show up as myself. And the reason that I do that is because I'm just that way anyway. But when I thought about it, when I thought about like, is there an advantage to sending a representative on a date? And there is none, because
Mm,
you lose either way. And here's what I mean by that. If the woman likes your representative, she still hasn't met you. And
mm.
when she finally does, because she's gonna, you can only keep up that facade for a few weeks or a month at best.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it's exhausting. And I've never met a woman that could keep up the facade more than a month. And, so once she meets the real you, she might not like you. Right.
Yeah.
And conversely, if you send the representative and she doesn't like the representative, then you lost out because she never got to meet you. So it's a lose-lose situation either way. So I want the same in reverse. I want the woman to be authentic, be yourself. If you're a strong woman, be a strong woman. If you have strong opinions, share your opinions. If you withhold yourself, like, I mean, there's some practical things. Like, I curse like a truck driver, and so I generally will tamp that down in the very beginning, because that becomes more of a distraction than anything else. So I'll let you know that I do have the words that I need to describe what I want, and then eventually you'll hear me cursing more as time goes on. But aside
So
from minor,
can
yeah,
I interject and say,
sure, sure.
is it just a distraction, or is there an element of respecting a woman in those initial stages as she's slowly peeling the onion back, as she's slowly getting to know you? I'm curious, does respect
Well,
come into that at all?
no, not for me. Because I don't think it's disrespectful to curse. I think they're just vowel sounds. And if I can say fornicate, why can't I say fuck? It's kind of silly to have these arbitrary rules for vowel sounds.
Okay.
I don't believe in the concept of bad words, but I know people do. So the reason I call it a distraction is because if you're one of those people that believes in bad words, and I use bad words, that's just going to distract you from what I'm saying. So I'd rather
And
that
if
you hear
you're
what I'm saying.
Yes, and if you were meeting someone, a female who was very auditory, then that would also be really distracting for her, because
It could
she'd
be, yeah.
be, yeah, yeah,
And listen, water attracts water, just seeks its own level, and like attracts like, right? So most of the time, the type of women I meet, they tend to be very strong women, so cursing is not an issue for them. and
yeah.
and the funny thing is that the reason I know that is because once I finally start cursing, then they start cursing too. Like,
I used
literally, I've never gotten the feedback, oh my God, you're cursing, I don't like cursing. No, I usually get, oh, what a relief, I can finally talk the way I talk.
I used to have such a hang up. It was such an ingrained belief system from my childhood, of course, where
Right.
it all comes from. I used to have such a hang up about the word fart. I couldn't, like, forget swear words. I couldn't deal. Someone would say fart. Some guy'd be really nice, and then he'd say something about
That's
farting, and I'd go, oh, holy Toledo,
that's
holy
funny.
Toledo, Batgirl.
That's a funny thing to get triggered on, but yeah,
It
listen, we
is,
all have that stuff.
but hey, I'm good now. You can fart, fart, fart,
Yeah,
fart, fart
yeah,
as
yeah.
much as you want.
Right. Yeah, we all have that kind of conditioning. It's a lot like what Shakespeare said through Hamlet. Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yes, so
You know,
yeah.
and so you grow up. Like, I have a thing with cracking chewing gum. It's I didn't cling on to much of what my mother attempted to teach me, because most of it was rubbish, but uh, I did cling on to that, which is, if a
So
woman's cracking her gum,
so hang on.
it's
As an Aussie, we've got an American and an Aussie thing going on here.
yes,
So
yes.
so cracking gum is
Like when you're
blowing a
making,
bubble
no,
and
no,
then
no, making
all
popping
right.
sounds when you're chewing it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. All right.
yeah.
Okay.
Like in America, some women like to do that, and I find it disgusting. But the only reason I find it disgusting is because my mother brainwashed me to think it's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just kind of chose to keep that. That's part of the brainwashing I'm okay with, but, But yeah, so we all have that kind of stuff. We all have trigger words. We, like in America, uh, there's a word that's very, very common in England and Australia, that women will flip out over if you use it on them in America.
Sheila?
No.
Okay, all right. I'm
That's
not going
an
to.
Australian. No, it's cunt. It's the word. It's the word cunt.
Oh,
Women in America
yeah.
flip out about that.
Yeah. Actually, I do know a few women here who flip out about that too. Hands up, I got to own that. If you want to be authentic, that was another one. It was like I could only ever go, see you next Tuesday. See you next Tuesday.
That's funny. Yeah.
But we grow and evolve. I think I'm gonna do you. I do a you. I'm hanging on to see you next Tuesday because I'm really not a fan. But
whatever works for you. Whatever gets you through the night is all right.
I can evolve on the fart side of things. All right.
Yeah, listen, progress is progress.
Those methane gases, they're just rocking it out.
It's like I say about whenever I lose 20 pounds. I say, look, if you take a boulder out of the Grand Canyon, it's technically progress, but not necessarily meaningful. So hey, you start with fart and work from there.
So we've gone from talking about mating dances and women having to ante up to farting.
Yeah.
Testament to covering all angles, I say.
So this brings me to the second half of the question of what do I want, right?
Yes, please.
So this is what I don't want. What I don't want is for women to fail me a test that I don't know I'm taking. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's all about expectations, right? Like expectations are unnecessary and more often than not counterproductive. Don't expect me to be something. Just see what I am. It's easier, because once you start, because this has been the ruination of a couple of my relationships, and when I meet people, I now have the habit somewhere around the first or second date. I like to let them know that what you see is what you get with me. Like, this is it. So if there's something do
women believe you? I bet they say.
I don't know. I just take responsibility for saying it because I want them because it's probably going to come up later on. So I want to remind them that, hey, this is what I told you, because it's whatever you like about me now is what you're going to like about me in 20 years. And conversely, whatever you don't like about me now is also what you're not going to like about me in 20 years. So don't presume the change. Don't have expectations about me. Just see what I do, because I'm just going to see what you do. I'm just, I'm here. I'm not going to give you my list of grievances and my list of expectations and all that other nonsense from the past. I am actually a very romantic person. I've been divorced twice, but I like to joke I'm always on the lookout for my third ex-wife, right? I always believe that the next person, that's a great line, isn't it?
No, it's a great line, but I don't know if the woman in front of you wants to hear, I'm on the lookout for my third ex-wife.
No, Karen, I'm not stupid. I don't say that to women, but the fact is that what I mean by that joke is that, hope does spring eternal with me. Like every woman I meet, I see her as potentially being the person that I will spend the rest of my life with. That's my assumption going in, and then it's going to be up to her to prove me right or wrong, right. And I have very few needs. And they're very simple. Like I like affection. I'm a hugger too. So before this date, we both took a COVID test just so we could hug each other.
Yeah, right.
Because that's important to me. I'm a hugger. I love to hug people, right?
Forget
and by the way,
STDs. Forget STDs. We'll just go with COVID test, hugging. The world has changed.
Yeah. And like if you want to talk about the pandemic hardship, the only hardship that I've experienced is that my son and I don't hug anymore, because he's out and about. I don't mix with as many people as he does, so we figured just be smart and we're not going to hug. But other than that, I'm good. But I don't have things that are difficult to deliver. Be honest, be affectionate, be genuine. That's all I really ask. And the thing about a long-term relationship is that they don't really exist. There's really no such thing as a long-term relationship. There's really only now, because every day that you wake up, you can choose to end the relationship, right? Every day you can choose, because yes, it takes two to tango, but it only takes one to end the dance, right? So if one person wakes up and says, this is not for me anymore, then it's over, right? And to me, forget about we've been together 5, 10, 15, 20 years. None of that matters. Do we want to be together now? That's what's important. So I just want authenticity. I want the focus on now. I don't care what your history is. I'll be happy to hear the details of your life and your stories and all that stuff. I like telling my stories too. But what I won't do is make you responsible for all the women that I've known before. Right.
Which is so important.
Yeah. I don't want to walk around as someone that's a hurt person looking to be saved. No, I've experienced what I've experienced. And frankly, despite the fact that I've had the same kind of painful experiences that other people generally have in life, I've had some phenomenal times as well. And I focus on them too. I acknowledge the fact that I've had, even in my worst relationships, I've had some phenomenal experiences. Right.
Yes.
So the most important thing is that win, lose, or draw, whatever my relationships were in the past, it would be ridiculous for me to hold you accountable for them. I'm meeting you for the first time. I want to know you. You don't represent all women to me. You are just you.
Yes.
And so that's what I want in return from women. Like, because I can't tell you how often I've heard, well, so and so in the past, I don't give a shit. I'm not that guy. I'm not responsible for the dumb shit he did.
Exactly. And, they're bringing into that relationship, their past relationship, as you said. And it's like, you can't, why? Because then everybody suffers, it's just, so I love the fact, I'm just going to digress here because my brain is now having a little ADHD moment. So okay, I'm loving all the responses to that, and it's very enlightening, and it's repetitively enlightening for me, and hopefully any other women that decide to watch this, because I can think of a couple of times in my lifetime with people I've been in long-term relationships in, and that conversation also from a man's perspective about expectation, a woman's expectation, or an expectation of an outcome that they're involved in, that comes up a lot as well. And clearly I didn't hear it. I thought I heard it then, but I didn't hear it, and so to have you validate that and clarify that for me today is amazing. So thank you very much for that. I'm obviously hearing it now. And the other question, well, there's lots of them, but the other one is, you're talking about, get excited.
Yeah, good.
You're talking about what you want and you don't want. Now, I know that you're speaking for yourself. Do you know other men who openly talk about this with you and all they express? Is that right? I love this. Hang on.
That's a great question.
You're very passionate. Hang on one moment. Let me finish. So what is it exactly that other men discuss with you? And are they looking for the same simplicity, or is their simplicity, because I'm not assuming that men are simple, however, I'm simply going on information I've been given, and that is so many times I hear men say, all I want or all I need are these simple things in various ways.
Excellent question. Yeah. So the predominating wisdom among women is that men are not emotional and men don't express their feelings. They're right to you. We express our feelings to each other. And the reason that we do that is because women can be vindictive animals. And if we share our deepest, darkest feelings with them, very often they will rear them up again in the future and try to hurt us with them. And that's consistent among every man I've ever spoken to. And I particularly pay attention to the conversations that I have with men who have been divorced and why they have been divorced. And it's essentially the same story every time. Um, and this is in the case of a man deciding to divorce his wife. And it's almost always that they just were taken for granted. Like the woman that decides that she doesn't need to treat him the same way she did in the beginning because um, women like to settle into a routine. They like to just know that everything is in its place. He's my man. Here are the children. Here's my job. Here's whatever roles they have, right? Which is all great, but the old saying is men want women to stay the same and women want men to change, right? So
Right.
women really do like men. Men very often the lament of a woman changing. And I don't mean growing as a human. I mean going from a woman who loves to have sex all the time to a woman who never wants to have sex, and has this long list of excuses for why they don't want to have sex. It's like, you're sad.
Yeah.
Well, sex will fix the sadness. You don't have energy. Sex will fix it. Like, we just will have sex no matter what. We'll have sex when we don't want to have sex. Right. I've told women a few times, I was like, when this started, I didn't want to have sex, meaning that session of sex. I'll be like, yeah, I was not into sex. I was just assuming that I would get into it at a certain point.
And it sort of brings up an ouch moment in the sense of, not for me personally, but for other women that I've heard discussing things. And that is the sadness of women that, we've touched on this earlier, but I know that women will talk about the fact that they're not very sexual, particular women are not very sexual creatures. So they play at being sexually healthy and having a sexually healthy appetite until they actually get the man. And their version of get the man is either they get put a ring on it or whatever it is. And
I'm so glad you said this.
And then it changes, and I'm
right.
like, I sit
because
there horrified.
Guess what?
There's no authenticity in that.
Thank you. That's the exact thing I was going to say. And this goes back to why I want women to be authentic. Don't pretend that you're into something if you're not into it, because you cannot sustain that. Especially when it comes to sex. That's got to be the hardest thing to sustain. If you're not into sex, but you think, and this goes back to the really bad advice that women give each other. Very often when I'm coaching a woman on this stuff, I'll say, I bet your mother taught you how to get a man, right? Yes. Did she teach you how to keep one? Right? Because look, you guys know how to dangle the bait, right? Because that's your part of the mating dance, is you're trying to attract us, right? So you know how to do that.
Yeah, we got that part down pat. Like, come on, give it credit where credit's due. Most women, majority of women, have got that part of the dance down pat.
Right. So that's the first part of the dance, because remember, we're building from different directions, right?
Yeah.
So if you have that part of the dance down, but then you don't have the second part of the dance down, which is where you actually develop the relationship and incentivize the man to want to be in that relationship, well, guess what? Your relationship's going to suffer, and they're all going to come to the same end that they've always come to.
Yeah. If there's no if the foundation is shaky and there's no substance there, as you said, I mean, longevity just isn't even an option.
Yeah.
That it's just more game playing, and that's the other thing. Then more roles get brought into play. So yeah, absolutely. There was something you said earlier. I should have, woulda, coulda. Something you said. Anyway, it's gone. I'll have
That's
to.
all right. It might come back.
I'll watch the edit and the replay, and then I'll message you going, I have a question about this.
And that's fine. We can certainly do this again. But here's something that I want to talk about also with regard to what men want. And again, it goes into the idea of the mating dance, right? Here's something that you've probably heard. I know I've heard it so many times from women. They'll say, I don't understand why he doesn't want to be with me. I cook, I clean, I take care of the house, I take care of their children. Okay, great. Have you ever asked him if that stuff is important to him? Right? That's what's important to you because you were taught that that's what you need to do. And you were taught that by other women. All right. So when you list out all these things that you're selling, I'm selling cooking, I'm selling cleaning, I'm selling taking care of children, I'm selling taking care of the house. Is that what he's buying? Right.
And also you're being sold by generations that were less open to particular discussions about particular things that were brought to the table for women, sex, etc., physical contact, emotional needs, all of that, as in verbal emotional needs, masculine needs, feminine needs, all of that. So yeah, you're also being taught by generations who have been brainwashed by the generation before, the generation before. Yeah.
So that's why I feel that this kind of conversation is as uncomfortable as it is and how much resistance there is to it is very important because, and look, there are guys wandering around clueless. I won't deny that. But I think the biggest challenge is on the side of women because they just have these assumptions that have been handed down through generations that are just incorrect assumptions. And it really does interfere with relationships. Like the original piece that I did, if you love him and you want him to love you, well, try being lovable, instead of just saying he doesn't love me, he's got to go. Figure out, what his deal is. Okay. He did his job.
He's not doing
you.
A, B. He's not doing A, B, C, D, and F. And so therefore then you decide that you need to nag him on certain counts or you need to remind him of certain things.
Works so well. Yeah.
Clearly. Highly successful. So again, I often say to women, they need to sit down and put a new elastic in their big girl panties. And, I say, those panties that Bridget Jones wears in the movie? Dig that shit out. Put some new elastic in those big girl panties and sit down and have an open, real conversation. You'll be amazed at where it will go. But the more that you put up those defenses and nag, or the more that you nag somebody, anybody, teenagers, anybody, they're shut, eyes are glazed.
White noise. It's just noise.
A deer, Yep, deer in the headlights. Done.
I knew this couple. There was cousin Shirley and her husband, whose name I don't remember, but they were so funny because Shirley just talked a blue streak. She just barely took breaths in. It was always just right. And her husband would just sit there kind of looking off, and then like every 10 minutes he would just go, "Shut up, Shirley." And
that was his coping mechanism.
But what's funny about that is he obviously wasn't listening to what she was saying. He was just listening to the fact that she was talking. Right.
Gotcha.
So he's the extreme example of what you're talking about. Someone that's just shut someone out, and yes, nagging, you can't nag someone into changing their personality. You know,
No.
that's why I tell people, look, I'm fully baked. And I've been saying this since I was 35. When I meet a new woman, and the reason I picked 35 is in America, 35 is the minimum age for a president. So I figured the forefathers thought that you were an adult at 35. So I figured I was an adult too, right? And so when I turned 35, I started saying to women, look, I'm fully baked. This is it. What you see is what you get. Right.
Yeah.
So just forget, if you say to yourself, well, he's okay except for this one thing, but that'll probably change, you're kidding yourself. It's not going to change. You know, will I evolve and grow as a human being? Of course. I have made leaps and bounds as a human being in terms of when I look, it's like Muhammad Ali. If a man is the same in his 50s as he was in his 20s, he's wasted 30 years, right? It's a great quote. So yes, am I different than I was in my 20s? Of course I am. I'm more patient. I'm more knowledgeable. I'm hopefully more wise. But I'm still me. You know, I still laugh the same stuff I used to laugh at. I still have the same personality that I've always had, and almost all of the beliefs that I've always had. So, you know, this idea that you're going to meet someone, especially as you get older. I mean, that door is only maybe open in your 20s, like the idea that someone's going to change. But after that, it's like, just assess what you see, ladies. Just take in what you see and believe what you see. Don't kid yourself into thinking that somehow, either through miraculous intervention or your amazing ability to change people, which you've never been able to do before, you're gonna suddenly do it with this guy.
So as a woman, that takes me back to acceptance, seeing the person for who they are,
100%.
not planting expectation. Yeah. And even though hope has its place in various areas of life, not to sit there in hope of, I really like A, B, and C, but hopefully that will change. Yeah. Well, did you see that thing I put on social media? It was that little cartoon. It was a while ago now, but it was such a succinct way of saying things, where the woman walks in nagging the guy about leaving the toilet seat up. Did you see that one? Anyway.
I don't recall it right now.
Okay. So because she's walked in, toilet seat's up, she's nagging the bejesus out of him, right? The whole bathroom is full of bras, stockings, makeup,
I've seen
hair dryers.
Yeah.
And I just go, perspective, like how she still would walk in and nag the guy about leaving the toilet seat up. So it's about perspective and seeing things clearly for what they are. And for me as a woman, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I've really learned to be more appreciative of the person that I'm with, and often verbalize that. I didn't always verbalize it. I might quietly think something, and that's lovely, or I might share it with a girlfriend, lovely, but I didn't always tell him. So I make sure that I'm quite vocal about things that I really appreciate, from the smallest of things to the largest.
Well, this goes back to what I said earlier about the number one reason that men tell me they get divorced, which is they felt taken for granted. Right? So yes, those things are important. Despite popular belief, we cannot read your minds. Okay. We don't know what you're thinking. We might know you well. We might understand you. We might have a sense of what's going on, but we don't know what you're thinking, literally. So you've got to tell us,
Absolutely. And I think it's a really positive wheel, in the sense that surely I see that in a lot of cases with people, that if the woman starts consistently, genuinely, not just doing that was fantastic. If she genuinely, yeah, exactly. If she's genuinely feeding her man and appreciating her man, then he seems to naturally want to support her, which is something that most women really appreciate. So it's like this very healthy cycle that just organically commences. But I find that it really needs to be instigated by women, because a woman can say to a guy, I really need you to support me. And this taps into what you were saying. And it's like, okay, I can sense some things or whatever, but if you're not going to tell me, if you're not going to explain to me exactly what it is that I need to support you with, then I'm not a mind reader. Hang on, as my previous partner would say, I'll go and get my saucepan and put it on my head,
right.
you know, and it was like, okay, so let's start the cycle of appreciation and support. And then I feel communication happens more smoothly.
Yes, that 100%. And that reminds me of something that I like to talk about with women. I actually have this on my dating profile. It says, I say what I mean and I mean what I say. There is no need for you to decode me.
Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm speaking to my ex-partner right now. Besides be the change you want to see in the world, that was
Yeah.
probably pretty much what he lived by. Say what you mean, you know, no, is it, oh my goodness, I've forgotten which way it goes. Say it again.
Say what you mean and
you
mean what you
and
say.
mean what you say. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the one.
but because here's what I've experienced many times. I'll say something which is 100% the way I'm feeling and thinking, and rather than deal with what I've said, the woman decides that I must mean something else. And then she's dealing with the thing that she made up that I mean. And then later on, when it comes up again, I'm like, yeah, no, I didn't say that. That's what you said to yourself.
Yes, because we are emotionally so layered, and I'm not saying that you as a man aren't, or
Mhm.
men aren't. It's just we look for the in betweens, and we have to educate ourselves that often there aren't any in betweens. This is
Right,
what he's saying. This is what I need to be able to hear,
right.
and actually look at putting my energy into that.
Yeah, because if he's being inauthentic, you're going to figure that out quickly enough. I mean, there's that's not that hard to figure out. So why not default to, if he said it, that's what he actually means? Because
Because
once you start
sometimes it's
getting
too hard
into,
for them, because
yeah,
it's softer, it's easier, it's easier for women. You know,
right,
if a guy says, okay, let's use your example, you know, I really love you, da 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 da, for whatever reasons we're not able to have sex right now, so how do you feel about me going and having, you know, random sexual encounters with strangers, da 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 da, but I'm still completely 100% committed to you and in the relationship? There are a lot of women out there, irrespective of age, that would go, does not compute, does not compute. I cannot hear this. I
yeah,
cannot hear this.
yeah,
He mustn't mean it the way it's coming across, because clearly that must mean that he doesn't love me anymore and he's not
right,
into me. And so it
right.
goes. And so they come up with a new scenario that is softer and kinder to them, that they think that they can intelligently and emotionally navigate around to find out what you really want.
Well, what guys do in that situation is cheat. That's part. I mean, what is cheating? Like you could characterize cheating in a lot of different ways. And look, there are some guys. I will fully acknowledge that there's scumbags out there that just are hurtful and deceitful, and that's how they live their life. I get that. That's true. But again, most of the guys that I've talked to, it's been, she doesn't touch me anymore. She doesn't acknowledge me anymore. She's taking me for granted. Da da da. And so here's a guy who's in love. He loves his woman, whether it's his wife or not. He loves his woman, probably lives with her, wants to be with her, wants to maintain the system that they've worked so hard to create, but he wants this extra thing that she's not willing to give. So he sneaks away to go get that tiny piece of happiness somewhere else. And he essentially lies about it because he doesn't want to hurt her in the process, because she's demonstrated to him in the past that telling the truth really isn't the best policy.
And I understand that. I also understand why women react the way they do when they
Of
find out,
course,
because
of
then there's
course.
clearly
It's a
betrayal and everything.
horrible feeling, of
And
course.
the big question is, is it a one-off? Did you go back for more than once? Da 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 da. Because I know for a lot of women, that is one time is like, ouch, there's a sting.
Yeah.
twice, three times, four times with the same person, okay, we're starting to formulate a bond with this person now.
Yeah.
We're formulating a bond and a type of emotional attachment and relationship. And for women being emotional creatures, that cuts so much deeper.
Right. And what I would say is this: because I've spoken to both types of men, which is the honest ones and the dishonest ones, right? And my question is always the same: did you have this conversation before you did this? And if you didn't, that's on you. That's a lie of omission. Because what I chose to do was have the conversation up front. I never wound up, being with someone else. I just ended the relationship shortly after that. But if you don't give the woman an opportunity to respond to what you're requesting, then that's not honest. And some guys just get off on that. Some guys just live for the thrill of cheating and all that other shit. It's childish, but there are guys like that. But that just, in my experience, that hasn't been the majority of guys that I've known. They just aren't willing to give up sex, or it's not even just the physical act of sex. I think that's actually the least part of it. Yeah, we've got all these sensations that are built into the organism that makes us feel good. That's great, but it's the closeness, it's the intimacy, the connection. Yeah, it's just as important to guys as it is to women. Again, it looks different on both sides, but it really is the same. Like that's why, despite what women think, it's like, well, look around you. There's all these guys married. There's all these guys living in a house, and they've bought into the system, right? So obviously we wanted the same thing, but now it's like, okay, we've built this system, and now you want to change the system because part of the system was sex.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And what I'm hearing too with you, and I'm happy to be wrong, if correct me if this is off track. I'm also hearing connection, absolutely. I'm hearing about having the conversation, jokes aside, putting on the big boy or big girl pants, having the tough conversation, which is not easy on either side.
Right.
And then I'm hearing being open enough to discuss it, and if needs be, either rectify what's going on, come up with a compromise or something that's going to work, or if we're going the other way, then set some very clear boundaries. So as a woman, you'd say, I'm only going to be happy with this if you see different people each time. Sure. You don't build a relationship with a particular person.
And that's perfectly fair.
Runs the risk of bringing other things into the relationship unnecessarily.
And I believe if a man does develop a relationship with another woman, obviously it's diluting the main relationship, and
correct.
I don't know one man that has that as a goal, that wants to wreck the system. They want to fulfill one of the strongest human needs that they have, and I think it's a testament to men that don't immediately turn around and say, well, if you're not going to have sex with me, I'm out of here. It's not what they're doing, because they want to be with this person. I left the woman that I love the most. It wasn't really about the sexual thing. That was part of it. But, I left the woman I loved the most because it got to the point where, I felt worse with her than I would feel without her, because ultimately this is what I have boiled down to what relationships mean. Like, what are relationships? And to me, a relationship is how I feel about myself in relation to another person. Right. And of course, there's all sorts of different relationships. There's employer-employee relationships, there's fellow employee relationships, there's family relationships. And even within the family, there's hierarchies. Like your relationship with your mother is different than the relationship with your father. It's different than the relationship with your siblings. Your friends, you have a different type of relationship. But in all of those relationships, the value and positive nature of the dynamic is going to determine whether they are healthy and feeding you or hurting you, right?
Correct.
And when I
Yeah.
got to the point where my relationship was hurting me, I had to choose myself over the relationship, and it was a hard
Yeah.
decision, and it was one that I put off for years because I didn't want to do it. But I got to the end of the line, and I was just like, I've got to go, you know.
Yeah.
Luckily we're friends today after, and it's a hard fought friendship and a hard won friendship, but you know, it taught me a lot, because you know, people tend to think, oh, he's got two divorces, what does he know about relationships? It's partly because I have two divorces that I know so much about relationships, you
I
know.
agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
You know, and I really, the relationship with her really taught me about what is important to me, because I there was a time in my life up until my mid 20s where I was willing to put up with all sorts of horrible stuff just because I didn't have a clear picture of who I was, you know, because men in their
Mm.
20s are basically useless. They're just
You're just Labrador
throbbing,
puppies,
yeah, yeah,
darling.
yeah,
Labrador
yeah,
puppies.
throbbing erections, running around for a place to park. You know, it's, and that's
Licking your
fine.
balls.
Yeah, yeah, and whatever, you know, and so and but then, you know, you move out of your 20s, and for me it was when I was 26, I did a year of celibacy, uh because I had had 5 train wreck relationships in a row.
Mm.
And after the fifth one, I said, well, all right, are they crazy chicks? Yes, but I kept inviting them into my life. So the common thread among these dysfunctional relationships is me, right? So then I decided, okay, how do I address this? And I said, well, I've got to reorient how I think about women. So I decided a year of celibacy, which wasn't easy. You know, I was a thin, good-looking dude in my 20s, so giving up sex for a year wasn't an easy decision, but it was, the in the top 3 best decisions that I've ever made. One was having a son, or having a child who turned out to be a son. The second was celibacy, and the third was switching to boxer briefs.
I was waiting for the third pearl of wisdom. I was not expecting that one.
That's comedy. A little switch in
It's
direction there. Little
full kudos.
misdirection.
Full kudos to you.
And even though
You
that's
know,
funny, it is true, though, you know.
and as I listen to you again, I'm taken back to my own relationships. And the beautiful thing is, I'm sure a lot of people watching this will be drawn to their own relationships as well. And there's so much that you've said and shared that I really appreciate, because the similarities are great, and I'm sure they are with a lot of people on the planet. You know, my previous partner was brave enough to let the relationship go the second time because we'd reunited. And although it was devastating at the time, I can totally appreciate the courage that it took now, and how emotional he must have been when he was at a very fragile point, as was I, but we were clearly both completely done. Like,
Right.
we just exhausted each other. We were fighting just to hang on to whatever positive threads we had. It had, you know, we were so exhausted that it was starting to turn. The link was toxicity. That was the link. Yet
Yeah.
underneath that, there had been such a phenomenal love. However, it had run its course. And, you know, and again, this takes us back to another conversation that we had earlier about timeframes of relationships and being in the now. And it was now detrimental to both of us,
Yeah.
physically, mentally, emotionally. It was no longer, the only thing that was holding us was the struggles we'd endured together, the courage it took to stay together, the history we created together, and the love that we had.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we still have love. Like, I still have love for him,
Sure.
clearly, but it's a different type of love now. And I have
Well,
a
yeah.
greater appreciation
Yeah.
of certain aspects of things in our relationship.
You just reminded me of something that's so important. And again, it's the difference between men and women in building relationships. Women value love, men value like. We want to be in love just like everybody, because love is easy. Love is as bountiful as hydrogen. It's all over. It's built into us. Again, you watch children. The connection is obviously there. Falling in love is easy. Liking someone is not as easy, right? And I joke with my ex-wife all the time, because we still say love you when we get off the phone and via text and stuff like that. And we meet like once a year to have lunch, right? And I joke with her all the time. I'm like, I love you, but I still don't like you, right?
And this is just one of those amazing moments of being in the right energy space with the right person, because my mother used to say to me, now I've got to paint the picture for you. So I come from a family fundamentally of introverts.
Wow.
And then there was me.
So you're the black sheep.
And then there's me. So I've got all these introverts around me, and my mother is very, very conservative. People used to say, gosh, your mum's like Audrey Hepburn and you're like Dolly Parton. And, it was just chalk and cheese, right? So mum one day when I was in my teens decided to say to me, darling, I love you, but I don't like you very much. And I was like, what the? But she was so honest, and she said to me, I love you because you're mine, and I'll nurture you and protect you and do whatever's required. Absolutely. That will happen automatically. However, I don't think I like you very much as a person. We wouldn't be friends. And I was like, wow.
That's great honesty.
You just blew my mind. Like, you're my mother. So there was that expectation that, hey, your mum should love you, like you. She should run the gauntlet for you.
But that's not impressive, though. When a parent loves a child, that's the least impressive thing that I can think of. It's just going to happen, especially a mother. When you've had children, so the moment that a child pops out of you, your body is flooded with chemicals. Now, men have some of the chemicals that women have, but even when it matches up, it's not in the quantity, right? So you just get flooded. And, with men, it's like, it starts for us when we feel the baby kicking. And we love the children too, but we just don't have that same bond. So when a parent tells me that they love their child, that's just unimpressive to me. Do you like your child? Like, I like my son. He's my favorite person to hang out with. He's 35 now, and so we have great conversations, and we always have. I mean, his whole life. But we have a phenomenal relationship, and it's because we like each other. It's not just like, I'm your father, and you can't oppress someone into appreciate you. Oh, you have to love me. I'm your father. What that makes no sense.
Exactly. So full kudos to my mum. Like, it took me a while to wrap my head around that.
I can imagine.
As I've gotten on, and I had lots of questions. I was like, but why? And what is it? And she was like, she said to me, well, you're very animated and you're very loud.
Right. So
I'm like, what do you mean?
For an introvert, that's a horrible thing, So,
what do you mean? So I got it. So when I was able to, not meaning to, but when I was able to kind of chunk down on the conversation, basically my personality embarrassed her. It was,
I get that.
She would get embarrassed because she was such an introvert, and so there were a lot of actions and things that I did that she was just like, no, I can't have this in my energy. So I got it, and as I got older, I really appreciated that even more so. So fascinating stuff.
I totally get that. There's a film that illustrates that beautifully. In little ways. It's called Broadcast News. William Hurt, Albert Brooks, Holly, whatever her name. But there are these small moments between two characters when one of them kind of gets really animated. And the director made an interesting choice of showing the other person, like looking around, like who's watching while this crazy stuff is happening, right? Because that's a self-conscious person, right? And so, it's, I get in a family of introverts, you would be a problem.
I was definitely a problem. I took her along to a gig one day. I was emceeing this gig, and it was this very well-known Australian singer who actually is American, but she'd great success in Australia. And Mum wasn't well that day and she was with me, and I said, oh, just come with me. And she was like, oh, yeah, okay. And she did have an interest in the person I was interviewing. So she's come along and she's on the side of the stage and she's just sort of peering out through the curtain, just looking at all the people. And she was just like, back to the wall and said to me, you're not going out there, are you? And I'm like,
oh, that's funny. Yeah.
And she was actually having a full-on anxiety attack.
Sure.
For me.
Sure.
And it was, it was really, it was such an educational moment for me, because as an extrovert, I now am more sensitive towards people who are introverts, and I change my temperament slightly so I don't make them as uncomfortable. So it was a really good learning curve. But
no, those are important things to learn. If you have more questions before you get to them, you reminded me of something, and it comes up every time people are talking about their long-term relationships. They always refer to the time that they've been together, the length of time, the amount of time, whatever, right? And I always share this lyric from Boy George, right? Time won't give me time, and time makes lovers feel like they've got something real, but you and me, we know we've got nothing but time, right? Time is, people sometimes stay in a crappy relationship just because they've been in it a long time. And they think that there's some inherent value to that.
Yes. I only had this discussion yesterday. With someone talking about people that were celebrating, 50th wedding anniversaries. Let's use that as an example. And look, if they've been together for 50 years and they are genuinely happy, then I'm over the moon for them.
Sure.
However, if they're celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary and they've spent the last 30 years sleeping in separate bedrooms and they can't stand the sight of each other, then I'm not really feeling the authenticity in that. And, you can only use Joe's snoring or Marge's snoring for so long as an excuse.
Right. Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing, too. It's the idea of what constitutes a successful relationship is very interesting to me, because it's very often just how long have you been together? And I dated this woman in 1991. Actually, she was the first woman I dated after my celibacy, a woman I had known 5 years, loved her, wonderful woman, changed completely the moment we started dating. So I left her after a month and a half. But one of the things that she was talking about incessantly was marriage. Like a week into it, she started talking about marriage, and that set off a lot of red flags for starters. But I finally asked her, like, why is marriage so important to you? And she said, well, marriage means commitment. And I said, no, it doesn't. Commitment means commitment. If marriage meant commitment, 50% of them wouldn't fail. And, within the 50% that quote unquote succeed, there's other problems usually, like infidelity, like spousal abuse, like drug abuse. The idea that the end goal is, oh, your life is wonderful because you've suffered a long time with someone, is not something that appeals to me at all.
I'm feeling you. And in one of my relationships, it was not so much when people ask us about our relationship and how we stayed together. It wasn't so much the time frame that came up. It was what became the milestones were what we endured, what we had endured and overcome, and overcome. And although in some ways in the beginning that did bring us closer together, when it started to become a continual pattern, not so good. That's just absolutely, that rapes your soul. That absolutely rapes your soul.
It's called trauma bonding, right? So and we get it. It's just like people who have been in war.
Yes,
they tend to stay connected for the rest of their lives, but the thing is that every time they get together, they don't go to battle somewhere, right? Like the war is in the past. It's something it's the thing that brought them together, but it's not the thing that sustains them, right? So yes, when you're in a situation where uh, the war never ends, that's a problem.
It's like we were always in the trenches with wet feet, and
that works for some people, and because there's very often people ask me, oh, how could those people be together? And I'm like, the only ones that have to know are them, right? And for some people that dynamic works. It doesn't work for me though.
It's like people who argue all the time. Some people, that is their form of communication. That is the only way they know how to communicate. I'm not saying that's a healthy choice. I'm not saying it's a choice that I would choose. I'm merely saying
I've seen that. For them.
I was going to say, but I have seen a couple, actually, though, they've both passed over now. So they were my outlaws, my first husband. So we had the first marriage, the first husband, who I have to share, this is growth, this is involvement. It was our wedding anniversary 2 days ago. And because we were young, we always remember.
Oh, I saw the post on Facebook.
Yeah,
about that.
That's it. There's been a lot of water under the bridge. And that was major growth for him when he said to me, do you remember where you were 41 years ago? Happy non-anniversary. And I was like, booyah, that's growth.
Yeah. I made a joke about that on Facebook too. In 2019, my second ex-wife and I had the anniversary of our first date. So I sent her a text saying, is there a Hallmark card for this? It's, or like we got like this next year would have been our 20th wedding anniversary had we stayed together. Wow. So I'll probably send her a similar joke. Like, I don't know if Hallmark has a, happy almost would have been your anniversary.
So it's very personal. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, clearly. So can I ask you?
I like how this started, though.
So can I ask you why your first marriage didn't work? And who chose to end it?
I chose to end it. She was among the 5 train wreck relationships that I had in my teens and early 20s. I love her because she gave me my son. But it was a very, very dysfunctional and toxic relationship. And it was one of the, and I take responsibility for that because I chose to be in it. It was the kind of thing where it was the excitement that is generated by dysfunctional relationships can have some adhering qualities, like you said, the trauma stuff, right? So that was just nonstop battle,
I describe it as like having bipolar. So it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. Yeah. The highs are highs, the lows are lows. There's no even keel going on, but it becomes a bit of a seductive vortex at times. So it's you have to be careful not to get sucked into that.
And I have to share the idea that a lot of men talk about, and it's something that women probably hate, I think, but sex with crazy chicks. It really is that good.
I'm sure the guys watching this are going, yes. And I'm sure the women are going, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah.
So please, don't all go out and become Harley, what's her name? Harley Star.
No, it's the kind of thing where you can't fake that. You can't fake crazy. There's no way to pretend to be crazy. Not like, women.
Harley Quinn. Sorry, I just had a moment. I knew who I was doing. Harley Quinn. Don't all go out and become Harley Quinn.
No, Harley Quinn is Harley Quinn because that's how she is, right? She's not pretending to be that. So the guy that would be attracted to that that's a genuine attraction. It's never sustainable because someone's going to die in that relationship.
Yeah, because it could end up being a bit of a joke.
Yeah, there you go.
No, come on. I get,
the Joker, I
you're
get
the
it.
Joker.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It wasn't my best moment.
So, but the thing is, though, is that again, it's the same thing of guys on death row that have groupies, right? Women that want to marry them, even though they have murdered people. You know, like I saw an interview where they got two women in the same room sitting right next to each other that both were groupies of the same murderer. I think it was one of the Menendez brothers, which in America was a big deal. These twin brothers murdered their parents. And by the way, not just murdered them, but murdered them in a brutal, grisly way. Like, you know, shotguns at close range, you're talking about painting the walls with your parents. And they went and reloaded and came back in and shot them some more. So these boys were particularly special as far as how sinister and disgusting they are. And of course, they had women as groupies. And here's what was interesting, because there's two things that are interesting about that. At one point, while these two women are discussing the relationship they had with the same killer, one woman hauled off and smacked the other woman. Right. And here's why. And this is the second part that's interesting. And this speaks to why some people are willing to be in dysfunctional relationships, even if it's for a short time. When there's someone aberrant, it's the equivalent of the tiger that's terrorizing a village. You know, like every night the tiger comes and snatches one of you away and kills you. Now, if you're the villager that can go pet that tiger, you're going to feel really special, right? Because you're the one that the killer tiger accepts, right?
It's a good analogy.
And the reason why one woman smacked the other woman is because now she wasn't as special as she was. Before she went into that room, she was the one person that could pet the killer tiger. And now sitting next to her is another one.
Yeah, now she needs to be the head of the lioness pack.
And they were trying to outdo each other. Like during the conversation, they were trying to one up each other. Like, well, I'm closer to him because of that. He sends me 1 letter a week. He sends me 2 letters a week, you know, that kind of stuff. So you know, I don't regret the dysfunctional relationships I had. They taught me a lot. They brought me to a place where I had to assess myself and do the year of celibacy so I could learn things. And funny, I only learned 2 things from a year of celibacy. And to be precise, it was 11 months and 1 week, which for me at that time was a big deal. But here's the 2 things I learned. And they're going to sound like a joke, but they really aren't, right? The first thing I learned is that women are people too, right? Yeah. And I didn't know that before I was 27 years old, right? What I thought of women as were just basically warm places to park myself.
That's honest.
Yeah, you know, and again, in my 20s, so I think I can be forgiven a little bit for that. But if I still had that attitude now, that would be horrendous. I would deserve to be shot in the head. But you know, the second thing I learned was about myself, because I thought that sex was the most important component of a relationship with a woman. And it turned out that it was affection that I wanted. So I was getting lots of sex, especially since I was with crazy women who are very, very adventurous sexually, but I wasn't getting the affection. So ultimately, those were always going to be doomed because it's the law of diminishing returns. Yeah, the sex is great, but the crazy is just too strong. You know.
Yeah. So the affection with you, is the affection married with connection, or are they separate?
Marriage is a construct. It has nothing to do with
No, no, no.
anything.
I meant married as in melding together, not as in
Oh,
marriage, as in
yeah.
the Constitution itself.
Right,
So
right.
affection and connection, are
Yeah.
they
Well, there's
one
different
or
types of
separate?
there. I think there's I would say there's the physical affection, there's the emotional affection, there's the physical connection, and then there's the emotional intimate connection. You know, intimacy is not just sex. Intimacy, like I'm intimate with my best friend. To my knowledge, we have never had sex. So you know, it's really about what the whole package is. Like any woman that I date, as I mentioned, I always believe that there's the potential that this person is someone I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. Um, and you know, what gets revealed to me as time goes on is whether I'm right or wrong about that. And a lot of like, here's what I think the three basic components of a relationship are, and although there are other components, I believe that these three are critical and determine whether you're going to have an opportunity to have a successful relationship or not. One is social compatibility, which is just
Mm.
simple, like we kind of like most of the same stuff, you know. Like Chris Rock joked in 1999, if she's into church and you're into crack, there's going to be a problem. Right. and and then there's sexual compatibility, which is actually easy. That's the easiest one to figure out. You either vibe
Right,
sexually or you don't, right? But
right.
here's the one where I would say almost all of the quote unquote failures, and I don't even like to use that word, but most of the reason why any relationship, especially in the last 20 years, didn't last, it came down to conflict resolution compatibility, right?
Yes,
Like if you're a
yes,
talker and they're a yeller, that's incompatible conflict resolution,
yes.
right?
Absolutely.
And I had that with the woman I just broke up with in June. That's what it came down to. I was very, very fond of this woman. Still am. I think she's a wonderful woman. But the moment I did something she didn't like, and it wasn't even that bad. It wasn't like a serious big incident. It was just I did something she didn't like, which was I excused myself from a conversation because I thought it was a stupid conversation. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go, you know. And, you know, I texted her when I got home. We live very close to each other. So it was like 10 minutes later, I texted her, I'm home, no reply. Then I texted her the next day, how you doing? No reply. Then I texted her the day after that, no reply. So my next text was, when can I return your stuff? Right. And she was shocked by this. And I said, look, for 2 days, she wanted to talk when we finally got together to exchange our stuff. And I said, no, you had 2 days to talk to me. So what I learned was your way of handling conflict is to be vindictive. And I don't need to learn that more than once. Right.
Mm,
This is the
mm,
end of the road. Like, I'm a talker. Because you know, think about what most arguments are about. Again, boiling it down to its essence, an
mm.
argument is someone either said something you didn't like or did something you didn't like. That's it. What else is there
Yeah. Hit a trigger.
besides? Yeah, you. So here's how I handle it. I'll say, "Oh, you just said something I don't like. Let's talk about it." Or, "You just did something I don't like. Let's talk about it." Right? That's how I handle it. Now, if you handle it with, "I'm not going to talk to you for 2 days," we have conflict resolution incompatibility. So we
Yes.
can't do it. You know?
And I tend to refer to it as emotional intelligence in the sense of,
Yeah,
you know, it's a similar thing. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I've learnt to say, well, when you do blah blah blah, that makes me feel blah blah blah. So I take ownership of whatever it is, because you didn't actually make me feel that way. I felt that way because of something that you said or did that hit a trigger.
100%, yeah.
And I'm still owning that I'm being triggered and I am feeling that way, and I want to actually be able to resolve this. So, you know, now it's now open. Can we please have a discussion about this so it doesn't happen again? Or at least it can be minimized, or you can at least be more mindful and aware of it, and vice versa.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, and again, it doesn't make her a bad person. It doesn't make her wrong. It just is someone that you know, one of the three pillars isn't there, and you need all three. You know, if it's like a stool, you take one of the legs off a stool, it's going to fall over. Right?
Absolutely, and I'm totally feeling that, because I used to watch the dynamic between my parents, and Dad's way of dealing with something that he didn't like that Mum did was usually to become inflamed or to go to the man cave, which in his case was, you know, the garage, and tinker on the car and blah, blah, blah. But there was none of this going on. And Mum's way, which was classic and still is really with a lot of women, was to storm off or to walk, either way. Just actually, no, she didn't really storm off. It was just to walk off, and so ensued the silent treatment. And you know, I can remember as a kid going like, it's 2 days and we're still in the silent treatment. Like it was agonizing to bear witness to, and nothing, you could tell even as a child, nothing was being resolved.
And I would very often watch my mother and stepfather. She remarried when I was 7. And I got to watch them, and I just was amazed by how often they were having two completely different conversations. You know, and it's funny how people like, oh, you know, the key to a relationship is communicate. Well, will someone tell people how to communicate? That would be very helpful. You're saying this word, but you're not telling me what it means, you know?
The lips are moving. Well, you know, you're clearly stepping up and doing that for men, and I love the fact that you're doing that, FJ.
I hold men accountable, by the way. Even though I have very strong messages for women, ultimately, because of everything I said about nature, I criticize men and hold them accountable for the overall health of the relationship. Because if nature says that you are supposed to be the leader, then you need to be the leader, and you need to step up your game and do the right thing, and you know, maintain the health of the relationship. And if you don't, if you get tired and you falter, well, that's on you, brother.
Well, it's been pretty amazing, darling. So thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me in and, you know, sharing this space with me and having this lovely, fluid, organic conversation about...
Well, this will go as the 4th best decision I ever made.